All right. Welcome, everybody, to Sales Organization Best Practices. My name is Matt Ketchum. I'm Director of Marketing here at DocuSign. We've got some great stuff for you today on sales best practices. The fact of the matter is that DocuSign helps organizations close sales deals faster, period, full stop. Today, we've got two organizations who are going to come in to tell you guys about their DocuSign journey and what they're doing with DocuSign in sales to help their teams do more business and do business faster. So we've got Elizabeth from LinkedIn, as well as Brian from Salesforce to talk you through the journeys that their organizations have been on, and then a couple tips and tricks for folks who are looking to do similar implementations themselves. So first, I'd like to introduce Brian Driver from Salesforce. Brian is the product manager for e-commerce systems at Salesforce. He's been in enterprise software for 17 years, about that, working in a variety of sales, ops, IT positions, focusing on sales methodology, business process optimization, and agile delivery. So with that, I will hand it over to Brian.
Thanks, Matt. So yes, I am the product owner for e-commerce systems. Technically, we call it self-service commerce systems because it includes both DocuSign, which is part of our quoting flow, as well as what we call checkout, which is our e-commerce portal. And we own a few other pieces of that process peripherally related to it. Here's how long I've been in tech. My first job was selling Norton 2K, if anybody remembers that, prior to Y2K. So that was my very first tech job with Symantec. So I was with Symantec as a sales rep for about 6 years and in sales ops for 6 years. So I've got a familiarity with sales process. And for the last 3 years, I've been with Salesforce managing the self-service commerce systems. First things first, if you've ever been to Dreamforce, this is our safe harbor statement. You know it, you love it. You can look it up on our website. Basically, it means that buy Salesforce for the awesome product, not for anything we're going to talk about today in terms of process. And this is all going to be internal process. Although I'm a product owner, I'm in IT. So I build internal tools and process. I don't actually manage any products we sell to customers, but we're more than happy to talk to you about how to implement the things that we're doing today. So before I dive into these numbers, actually, I just should give you a picture of what we use DocuSign for at Salesforce. We use it for sales process, but we also use it for HR. We use it for offer letters. Something like 90% of our offer letters are accepted through DocuSign. We use it for comp plan acceptance in sales. I think 99% of our comp plans are accepted through DocuSign. We use it in real estate. We use it in procurement. We use it in a lot of different areas. So what we're going to be talking about today is really more specifically what we've done in the last year or so to enhance our use of DocuSign, to continue to streamline our processes using DocuSign. So that's what we'll be talking about today. So DocuSign by the numbers. These are specific to DocuSign usage for quotes. So these are our adoption metrics right now. And Americas, we have about 60 some odd %. APAC and EMEA, a little over 40. LACA and Japan are our biggest issues, our biggest problem areas. And a lot of that is due to, in LACA, issues with Brazil and data residency. And in Japan, a lot of it is the cultural challenges of trying to get e-signature adoption when there's a physical process that's very much embedded in doing business in Japan. So that's something we're definitely investigating options for fixing it. By the way, if anybody in the audience has had success in Japan or Brazil, I would love to talk to you after the session. So yeah, we highlight the issues we have with adoption. And deal size, you can see here the deal size kind of flips the other way. We're doing larger deals through print than through DocuSign. Now that's not necessarily because they need to be done that way. I think a lot of it is just cultural. If you look at this is really interesting. This is a report based on what I consider normalized revenue. So for opportunities between 50 and 250K, we wind up with deals that are closing way quicker on average using DocuSign than through print. These deals are all relatively the same size. The average deal size in every region except for Japan is around 100K for print and around 100K for DocuSign. So they're apples and apples roughly. But DocuSign deals are closing well over 100 days quicker on average. Now, is that because it takes 100 days to chase down the signature? No, it's because most likely there's either cultural issues or issues by segment or even by sales rep where reps just aren't taking advantage of all the opportunities available to them that sales automation tools and process give them. So this just highlights the issues we've had. This will be available on the slide deck. Now, one of the things we've done recently to increase our adoption of DocuSign and really streamline the customer process is we've implemented a process in our e-commerce system that allows for us to combine the collection of credit card data with the DocuSign signature process. Today, you can publish a quote through DocuSign, and a customer can log into checkout, which we also own, and accept that quote in DocuSign. The old state was that if the customer had a credit card quote, they needed to provide credit card information, they had to actually call somebody, give them the credit card number the old-fashioned way. They would enter that information into our CyberSource form internally, so we have a fully PCI compliant solution, but it's not necessarily compliant in the spirit of PCI because somebody's got to transact that phone number over that credit card number over the phone. So what we've done is combined our CyberSource processes whereby the customer themselves can self-service entering the credit card information on a new business quote. And then once they enter that information, CyberSource returns a token that we write down to the quote. Then the customer proceeds to sign with DocuSign. And actually, I'll go back to this because what this has done for us is it's really reduced the risk of PCI issues, you know, an AE writing a credit card number on a Post-it note, for instance. It's probably happened before. And it's also giving us, I think, lower risk in terms of the fact that if you don't publish through DocuSign and you publish a quote just through the normal e-commerce process, the agreement process is just a click-through agreement. It's a checkbox and a button. We don't actually write anything down. We don't gain a signature from that. And it's less defensible if there's a dispute of that contract in court. So DocuSign gives us something that's more defensible. It lowers our risk. It raises our compliance posture. So overall, I think this is going to be a very good solution when it goes live in about maybe a month and a half. So this is something we recently built for the ExactTarget integration. ExactTarget, if you're not familiar with them, they're a marketing cloud company. They do email marketing automation. And a lot of their products are very service-driven. And so they, like something like 40% of their new business quotes go out with services quotes, go out with a statement of work or an SOW. So their old process was that the quote and the statement of work had to be manually combined, manually sent out, you know, a lot of paperwork, a lot of latency and a lot of lag. So what we did was created a very straightforward process whereby the AE can attach the SOW or statement of work to the quote, and then that becomes available in our quote publishing process. Once that's selected, we send the SOW to DocuSign, we embed it in the QLV. When the customer signs it, we get the entire document back, and that's the source of truth, essentially. So we preserve that. We don't have to shuffle paper around. There's a lot less risk, and we do it all through DocuSign. And we return all of that back into our Salesforce org, and it's all written down in our DocuSign integration. So those are the two things that we've worked on recently. And again, what we've gotten from those pieces of work is we've really driven down our risk, but we've driven up our compliance and driven up productivity significantly. So where do we go next, and what do we learn? So our roadmap, complete self-service e-commerce through DocuSign. So a customer who goes to our checkout portal right now to accept a new business quote to activate a trial, they have the click-through process that I touched on earlier. We want to go through DocuSign for everything. So we have a signed document. We have something that is a lot more defensible than just a click-through quote. And it's a smoother customer experience for customers that might transact both new business and add-on quotes, or might transact from one company to another. When they leave one company and have one experience, then they come to another company and have a different experience. So it's a much smoother customer experience overall. Make DocuSign the default quote delivery tool. So this is something we want to do for all quotes, so that when an AE publishes a quote, the only option is DocuSign. They can't print to PDF. They can't send the customer a fax or an email, which is going to generate paper on the back end. And it's, again, streamlining the customer experience and making everything just more consolidated. And then, as I touched on earlier, we need to investigate what specific functionality or enablement efforts we need to execute on to boost adoption in Japan or LACA. So what have we learned? The biggest, most important thing we've learned is that adoption requires top-down enablement and enforcement. So you want to get your sales executives engaged. You want to get them talking to their managers, their AEs, about why they need to use DocuSign. And it really needs to be, to say a condition of employment sounds harsh, but it needs to be, it does need to be the standard. You know, executives need to be looking at these numbers, looking at which reps are using DocuSign more, which reps are not, and really driving home the point that not using DocuSign increases sales cycles. It increases the risk of losing a big deal at the end of the quarter. It increases the cost of sale if you don't use DocuSign. So we need to more fully utilize DocuSign's regional capabilities. They've made some enhancements in Brazil that we've got to take advantage of. So that's one of the next big things we're going to do. And then DocuSign will help shorten sales cycles. You know, maybe not 100 days, but it's going to help shorten sales cycles by days, even by hours can be really critical at the end of the quarter. And we need to explore innovative integrations similar to what we've done with the credit card form. We need to look at things we're doing outside of DocuSign today and how we can combine those into an experience for the customer that is going to make them walk away and feel that this has been, you know, a seamless experience. You know, that we aren't putting them through some sort of jarring transition between one system and another, which right now we kind of have between the different systems and the different processes we have that are customer facing. So that being said, I think I whipped through that. Any questions anybody has? Yes, sir.
The integration with the credit card processing,
Yeah.
is that all done internally because you guys have bazillions of programmers?
The integration itself was done internally, but we use CyberSource for our payment authorization. So it's a CyberSource API. It doesn't even transact our systems, but we actually coded the interface and coded the API integrations. And actually, you know what? Should we wait for questions at the end? Okay, go ahead.
So talking about the SOW and quote
Yes.
merging, so is the quote obviously generated from within Salesforce application?
Yes.
SOW, what was the origin of that? Is that also generated in Salesforce, or is that another application when you had to merge the two documents on a DocuSign?
Currently, those are manually generated. Our plans, and this is not something our team's working on, but our plans are to utilize our Aptus integration to automate the creation of statements of work through like special terms and things like that. So we use Aptus for our quoting as well as for our agreements. So that's another area where we can explore how to utilize these two different vendors' processes and tools to create a more seamless experience.
If I could follow on.
Sure.
So I saw the PDF look like it was an attachment to the opportunity.
Yes.
In your screenshot. So basically you're taking that attachment, taking the generated quote from Salesforce, merging them, and then sending it through the DocuSign, putting it in the DocuSign envelope.
That's correct. And the document we get back from DocuSign once it's signed is the entire document with the SOW as an addendum. So it's not two attachments, it's one single one. That was quite a bit of custom API work that we did, so anybody who'd like to know how we did it, I can introduce you to our devs. Yes, ma'am.
First, I have to say I loved your quote about DocuSign being a condition of employment because I'm trying to get my salespeople to use DocuSign for Salesforce all the time. So with that said, do you have any additional insight as to how you actually drove additional adoption for having them use that system?
That's the challenge we're facing right now. We currently give AEs the option to print to PDF without any conditions whatsoever. We have no thresholds around that or anything. So our revenue ops VP, who's probably our biggest sponsor in the executive suite, her name's Meredith Schmidt, she has mandated that we switch over to DocuSign for everything. And if for some reason a customer has a compelling need to print to PDF, they utilize DocuSign's capabilities and just deal with the watermark. You know, we have some corner cases where we might have, you know, competitors of DocuSign or business partners. We do business with them, even though we love DocuSign, that might not want that watermark. And frankly, you know, we have mechanisms, you know, and workarounds for that. So that's the plan going forward. In the next 6 months, we want to eliminate all PDF publishing altogether. Great. All right. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Brian. Next up, I've got Elizabeth Guerra. Usually I write down a couple of notes to introduce speakers on a note card to read out, but I couldn't do Elizabeth justice without reading what she actually put on her conference bio. Elizabeth believes in fitness of systems, mind, body, and technology all inclusive. As an early adopter of tools that enhance productivity, Elizabeth is considered a DocuSign hipster. She liked it before it was cool. She's implemented enterprise software programs at LinkedIn, including contract lifecycle management, CPQ, and DocuSign for every department and business unit. Adoption, governance, and creative solutions are her cup of tea. Much like vanilla ice, if you've got a problem, she'll solve it. She can be found, of course, on LinkedIn. Elizabeth?
Hi. Let's see if I can make this thing go forward. All right. So I am the manager of sales systems process at LinkedIn for the sales productivity and operations team. It's a mouthful, but essentially what we do is we make salespeople more productive and successful. We have a federated IT model, so our systems groups roll up underneath function. So I literally work for salespeople. It's rough, I'm not gonna lie. So a little bit about LinkedIn. So for those of you who don't know what LinkedIn is, we are the world's largest professional network, adding approximately 2 members per second. In fact, some of you might have just added it to your iPhones, and if you need your first connection, you can find me at the back. That's the wrong direction. There we go. Our mission is to create economic opportunity for every professional in the world, and we do that by hitting 90% of Fortune 100 companies as customers. We have over 7 million company pages where companies brand and manage themselves through our platform, as well as over 400 million members. We also have this super powerful revenue generation engine, basically punctuated with 3 core verticals, which are hiring, marketing, and selling, and recently we've added Linda and Elevate to those. Elevate was homegrown, and Linda has been acquired. So in talent solutions, we're disrupting the talent acquisition industry. We have all of these different teams that actually operate entirely separately, and that's kind of why I'm going to go into these. The talent solutions team provides things from our recruiter tool to job slots and mobilizing that super powerful thing that is the internal referral. Our marketers love us. We have been touted to have the most affluent and educated audience base in the world. And it's not just because it's a whole bunch of white-collar professionals, but because our members also have massive amounts of influence within their industry as well as their organization. So you can target someone in a region with a certain seniority and a certain role and give them your crafted message, and that's exceptionally powerful. We also have our sales solutions business, which is taking the vision of turning the cold call, which I'm sure all of your salespeople hate, into a warm introduction through the power of their network by being able to share value and really understand who they're connected to. It's probably connected to someone who can help them get that sale. And as I mentioned, we have just recently acquired Linda, so we're elevating professionals' knowledge base and also allowing employers to give amazing content to their employees to help elevate their talent pool within. And we have our newest, most nascent business, which is Elevate. It's an employee activation tool, which enables companies to provide curated content to help encourage employees to find their voice, but still speak to the company narrative. Okay, so in 2009, when I started at LinkedIn, we actually had 2 of those. We had talent and media. We had exceptionally disparate business processes and exceptionally ridiculous tools that we were using. So we needed to change that and get them all into a process by which they were closing deals at a rate that made sense, and there was less noise coming from approximately the 200 sales reps that we had. So I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story, and some of you may watch CBS's Scorpion. Anyone? Raise of hands. All right. So Scorpion is a team of geniuses with massive IQ that solve some really intense problems. Well, what you might not know is Walter O'Brien, real guy. He actually is a certified genius, and he has a team called Scorpion Computer Systems. But he also has a forward-facing or public-facing group called Concierge Up. What do? They solve any funded need. With the support of geniuses with massive IQ and project managers who index higher on EQ than IQ, He has super nannies manage geniuses to translate business process to the real world. So, DocuSign happens to be my genius. I happen to be LinkedIn's super nanny. And I have successfully made sure that we have taken massive amounts of use cases through LinkedIn, and I have translated the narrative that DocuSign has made into an amazing solution into real-world problems. My vice president, when he started at LinkedIn, actually we had EchoSign. I know it's a bad word here, but we asked EchoSign for certain functionality that would take both our talent business and our media business into following a very similar process of getting their deals done. When they were not able to provide us with this functionality, DocuSign stepped up to the plate, and we haven't looked back since. In fact, we saved in 1 year $1 billion in wasted sales cycle time, and today, over 90% of our orders are signed 18 hours after they are sent out. Similar to Brian, that is dependent on revenue size. So how we got there was, of course, by playing Super Nanny a little bit, but I'm going to share the 3 components that did get us there and how I did the things like the young lady back there who asked, how did I make sales reps use it? So first, you have to make it easier. One of those things is send out the PDF directly by DocuSign. The other thing is make it finish your process even when the customer signs on ink. So we use ink on paper, we send it back into DocuSign, we finish our internal workflow using DocuSign. Another thing we did was actually provide them something called an auto-signed order. At LinkedIn, we require 2 signatures, customer and internal. But if your order meets a certain set of requirements and you promise to send it by DocuSign, we won't sign it internally. So it gets done that much faster. So, still got to make it mandatory though. There's 2 types of mandatory. Mandatory internal and mandatory external. Realistically, there's governments, cultures, a whole bunch of things that will keep you from making it mandatory across the board. But when we got started, I turned what I call Italian guilt into a mandate. I would ask every sales rep who had under 25% usage at the end of the quarter, why? And it turns out they didn't really have a good reason, so I guilted them into using it. Next, you gotta show them value. Sales reps wanna close deals and they wanna close them fast, and frankly, you probably want them to too. So, when you can tell a sales rep that the reps who are using DocuSign are closing their deals 3 times faster and able to get them back in the day or the quarter they wanted to, that value speaks for itself. But we didn't stop there. If you go beyond sales, you'll actually find that being a super nanny here is where you have to do it the most. We found sales touch points that didn't necessarily include order form or contracting. But in almost exactly this order, we increased the value that sales found by including these touch points into the sales process so that our sales reps spent less time doing these things manually and more time closing deals. We took our sales order forms, we then turned it into comp plans, personnel action forms, and comp plans included the finance team, so finance people started to touch it. And our personnel action forms required an HR business partner to sign, so HR started to see it. Our SOX certifications hit the controller, and she thought it was awesome. Our NDAs worked for legal and for marketing and for anyone else who we didn't want to talk about our stuff. In procurement and with other legal agreements, we too have Aptus, and we also use it for sending out all of our legal contracts. We also do vendor onboarding. We've done member-facing forms, including content permissions, trust and safety, changes to member profiles. And so now, everyone at the company who started touching it because sales did wanted to continue to touch it. My mandate was pretty clear. I don't know if any of you know Brian Frank, but he's very clear with everything. He said, go find people who want to use DocuSign and you put it in their process. And some of you may know the quote from Henry Ford. You ask your customer what they want and they'll tell you a faster horse. So when wants don't meet needs, You find the things that you can manage, and you take those things and you use some of the out-of-box functionality, and the more people that touch it, the more the envelope count increases. And then the more the envelope count increases, the more people touch it. So funded needs did not need to be something I sought out. They started to come to me. In fact, our member-facing forms team had 24 specific forms that we migrated into Power Forms, and we integrated using email to case to the customer success tool. Today, approximately 4,000 envelopes per use case per year are managed through that process. She found out about it by using an NDA, which she found on our intranet. She went on, clicked a link, put in her vendor's name, shot it off to them, got it back in 5 minutes, called legal and asked if they needed a copy of it, and they said no, because they already had one. You can see why she wanted to do it the easy way. So how do you keep up the momentum? Totally cliche. Please enjoy it. Turns out you don't need a genius to figure out DocuSign. There's actually a lot of geniuses in this room that you can share some of that knowledge with. And you probably don't need a super nanny either, although I am still going to be at the back later. If you want to find me, I can be a super nanny for you too. But to recap, some best practices: measure and communicate the value. On that first use case, it is the most important. Look at your baseline. Figure out where you want to be. See if you're directionally sound, and then actually communicate it back to your stakeholders. Time saved, faster deals coming in, days sales outstanding reduced, less documents not in good order. Now, when you empower your sales org, you don't use the, oh, your documents are not in good order kind of thing. You say, you just got nag factor. You get to go in there and see when your customer got the document. Did they view the document? When they sign the document, and you can even nag the internal signer and tell them to go sign it because your customer's done. And of course, track all the internal touch points that you end up using by solving sales touch points. Those people are your next customer. That'll do it. Any questions?
What's Warren's organization called?
Whose?
Warren, the guy they based Scorpion on. What's his company?
Oh, Walter. It's called Scorpion Computer Systems, and the name of his public-facing arm is Concierge Up. Yeah. Great question. Other questions?
You talked about adoption with the Salesforce, and just even if it's one use case, and then work on that and kind of get that to go viral and just take it step by step. What happens when your detractors are your top salespeople that follow anyway?
You mean what happens in every company ever? Okay, just thought I'd check. So we did have a significant problem with our strategic accounts team. And the biggest challenge that we had was, I want to be showing them this without the signature lines in it. And I said, well, that's fine. You can make a quote with no signature lines in it. Yeah, but then they just want to sign it. So can I not have the DocuSign lines on there but still have the signature block there? And then you use the guilt, right? Why do you want to do this? Well, it's so painful for them to do this. So I went with them to their customer. I can't always do that. But I went with them to their customer. And it actually turns out one of those customers was HP, who had just bought DocuSign. And I asked why they wouldn't sign with DocuSign. And they said, actually, we do want to, but we want to use ours. And I found out I'm okay with that. That's okay with me. But it's going to happen. My best piece of advice is just keep asking why. If you actually ask why long enough, they just stop saying no and they do it. Works out pretty well.
Can I ask you a question on the signing on ink? You said that you sort of complete that through the DocuSign process.
Yes.
We do that as well, but it does create some problems. So if you don't know what you're doing, you can quite easily complete contracts the wrong way. So just curious if you have any controls around that or how you manage.
Yeah, so we do, and we built out a custom workflow management to do the finalization of the internal signature. So the customer will get the order form and they will print it. And when they print it, they get sent back to the sales rep. And the sales rep's job is one thing. Like, they don't have to load it into DocuSign. In fact, no one touches it. It goes into an email. And if they put the contract number that's assigned to that in the subject line, and they send it to what we call DS Auto, it's an internal email alias, we've built code in the back end to go and look at the actual opportunity that contract is related to. It will attach it into DocuSign, and it gets sent to our revenue team, and it has a note to the revenue team that says, this was what signed, please spend extra time signing. So like, we tell the revenue team, right? So, I mean, we kind of pass the buck a little bit, but they'll do it. So, so they actually spend extra time because it was a wet signature. Like, we call out in big red text, hey, this was wet signed. Do double checks on things like customer filled in fields. And so those ones that get then voided by our revenue team don't go straight back to the customer with the void. It only goes back to the sales rep, since they were the one who, through email, initiated it. And then it's their job to explain to the customer why their document's not in good order. It does encourage them to meet their customers not do ink signatures, because they don't want to have a deal not go through close one.
How many LinkedIn sellers do you have globally?
Like salespeople? Quota-carrying salespeople. Across all 5 lines of business, about 4,700. Yeah, so in 2009, we had 200 sales reps. There was about 50 in marketing solutions and 150 in talent solutions. And then a few years later, we ended up with like 3,000 all of a sudden, which was like bizarre. But we had built it in, so that rollout was a lot easier. We now, when we build any new sales process, because we're very verticalized in our sales and only strategic people can sell across the entire scope of the portfolio, every process that we start, there's 3 core pieces that you will get. You get our standard opportunity process, you get our standard signature process, and you get our standard renewal process. So even when a new business line spins up, like Elevate did, we basically gave them this, prepackaged, here's an opportunity signature and renewal process. Now what do you want? So no one can not use it, and that's part of the make it mandatory. Absolutely. Sure.
You mentioned some of the other groups that as they started, everyone's basically now using it. But I presume many of those groups weren't a Salesforce user. So
Right.
how did you, I guess, get them into that process? Because we're looking at doing a similar thing, and the first objection is always, well, we don't use those tools.
Right.
So it's now about how do you, well, we're trying to look at how to connect to their workflow where they're at.
Out-of-the-box functionality is super powerful. So when you can, and because those signers don't even need accounts on DocuSign, you actually just make them a signing function in some of those processes. So for example, personnel action forms. From within Salesforce, a manager would fill out all the stuff they wanted to change about the rep. It would go and populate this form, and it would kick off the workflow. And we had a manage address or a manage recipients process within it. And we made sure that the entire workflow was blown out based on the type of change the manager wanted to do. It would then hit someone as a signer in HR and a signer in finance, and all they had to do was click through the email. So they started to touch it and see it go faster. And what they really liked is they didn't have a stack of personnel action forms on their desk to sign anymore, that they had to find inter-office mail, which actually has never existed in LinkedIn, so to get it back to someone. So it just kind of created that desire to continue to use it. If you want more examples, I can tell you, but power forms are a super easy way to have no one need a license to everything or anything. Cool.
Elizabeth and Brian, I'm actually going to ask you to come back up here for just a couple more questions, because we do have a little bit more time, and then we can wrap it up. So the first one I'm going to have for for Brian, you mentioned a couple of things that you're working on. I'd love for you to talk through how you guys think about what that next use case is going to be and how you landed on, for example, the e-commerce piece as the thing to go and track down for the organization as, next on that prioritization list.
Sure. So the e-commerce thing really came about because we have the same team managing e-commerce and DocuSign. The business hadn't even asked for it. Once we started talking with the business about the risks we were facing going through the click-through process, the non-DocuSign process, which does allow for capture of credit card, versus going through DocuSign, which did not, and we explained to them, if we put a little bit of effort in here, I think it took like 4 sprints, we can actually mitigate all of that risk and give AEs even more reason to publish through DocuSign since they don't have to touch the credit card. And it made total sense. Light bulbs went off. So a lot of this, the interesting thing about Salesforce is we have an IT group that works a lot like sales ops, like I'm used to working when I was in sales ops. So, we're ideating a lot, even without business cases. And then we bring those to the business and propose, hey, maybe we make this change, and if it sells, you do it, and if it doesn't, you go back to the drawing board. So a lot of these changes to DocuSign have come about as a result of discussions between IT and the back office business folks, and not necessarily sales. As I mentioned, Meredith Schmidt, she's our revenue operations VP, so she handles all of the finance commerce systems on the back end, but she's been one of the biggest sources of enhancements and requests for our DocuSign backlog in the whole company. And she's completely separated from the frontline sales process.
Thank you. And Elizabeth, along similar lines, you listed an impressive list of use cases that you guys have gone through and implemented. I'd be interested to know how you guys chose each of those to go and work on. I understand you've got folks knocking on your door to say, we want this, but you've got limited resources to go and deploy. How do you decide what's the next thing to go and tackle?
As a project manager through and through, we ask them first what their measures of success are. And we want to understand the use case. So what's your business problem? What's the business case? What are the measures of success going to be? And my favorite question, when do you want to go live? Which is always yesterday. So when we look through those and we kind of stack rank them, we look at impact. And when we first started, we actually looked at impact based on who else it would touch who wasn't already touching DocuSign. So someone who may have an impact that was, oh, we're going to save 3 minutes per customer success rep. Well, those were going to touch members, which is valuable, exceptionally valuable. But in that scenario, we may have actually stack ranked higher something that was going to say, I'm going to have 6 internal signers, because it created that drive to use the tool. And that's when we were then able to say, okay, now we'll do everything. But we really focus on a very CSA-like model, where we built a governance and an internal training site where if someone asks and say, hey, I want to use this use case, we look through the use case, we put it into our development org, so into the demo org, we show them how it's going to work, and then we actually tell them, go into the demo org, play around with it, learn it, go see this training site. Once you're fully ready, we'll do one test and we'll dump it into production. So I've gotten out of the business of building new use cases, and the only time I get exceptionally involved is when it turns into a potential integration use case.
All right, thank you. To kind of wrap things up with you guys, I'd love for you to give, if you had one thought to leave the assembled group with in terms of how they should be thinking about their DocuSign journey and what they should be doing next, what would it be? And I'll start with you, Elizabeth.
I would have to say, as far as sales goes, they're a river, right? Like, you give them the path of least resistance, they will flow right down it. So if you literally punctuate the end of a contract generation process, whatever your process may be, we use draw loop, we use XAuthor, we use for all these different things, right? We have all sorts of different how you can make it, but right once it's made, it says, would you like to send by DocuSign? That button's there. Download takes 5 clicks. Send by DocuSign takes 1. So just make it easy, and the river will follow.
I would echo Elizabeth comments. The challenge we've had is that DocuSign came in quite late, you know, in our maturity, you know, in our corporate history, and you know what you've spoken to about the the more strategic AEs being a bit more reluctant. We've run into a lot of that friction and resistance. So the suggestion I would have, as I touched on earlier, executive sponsorship and engagement frequently, often, aggressively, is really important to any tools adoption or processes adoption, but most importantly with DocuSign, because it's such a, as a former sales rep, that signature, it's a visceral thing for an AE. You know, when they get that signature, they don't want anything. They don't want to mess around with that. They want to be able to do what they are familiar with. You know, they want to be able to get that signature in a way in which they're familiar. So if we're asking them to change, we're going to need somebody to tell them from the top, and we're going to need to have a very aggressive enablement program, which we're going to have to do when we standardize on DocuSign across the board. So yeah, that's the key, I think, when you try to get your sales group to adopt DocuSign across the board.
All right, thank you guys. One more round of applause. So thank you guys for coming out for the session. One last thing that I'm going to ask you to do, if you've got the mobile app on your phones, go and fill out your ratings for this session. We want to know what we're doing, what we can do to do better, what we did do well that you'd want us to go and repeat. So we do read those. We do want your feedback. My boss is going to read those. I want a good review. In terms of the rest of the day, back in the auditorium with the main stage, we've got the Chief Digital Officer from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation talking about taking DocuSign to create a digital revolution across the nonprofit space. Some really great stuff there. And then we'll wrap up for the day. So thanks much, and hope you enjoy the rest of your momentum.